Hi there. In this action we see Mikhail Tal playing against Mikhail Botvinnik in the 1960 World Championship match, round 11. Before we get into it, I'd just like to say this is a great example of Mikhail Tal playing just as strategically as Botvinnik. Yes, with great tactical ability, but this kind of idea that Tal was just a tactician is dispelled by the style of this game that we're about to witness. So look out for the style of this game in particular from Mikhail Tal. So knight f3 from Tal, knight f6, g3, g6. So a Fianchetto system. So Tal castles here, black castles c4, c6, b3. So a double Fianchetto is coming up of the d4, protecting the rook. d5, bishop b2, bishop e6. And here a decision has to be made about this c4 pressure. Should it be taken seriously that black's trying to win a pawn? Tal actually plays a very, very interesting move indeed. For 100 points, can you guess what Tal played in this position, which is really quite clever? And it is kind of based on a weakness of the last move as well. Knight bd2, or trying to weaken g5 if this knight takes to try and win c4. So let's see this in action. Knight takes d2 is played. So here, critically, for any advantage at all in the position, white needs to play the correct move here. What would you play here for 100 points? Okay, it's queen takes d2. Note that the knight, one downside of the knight taking on d2, it neglected g5. So now we see knight a6. If d takes c4 trying to win a pawn, white's best is not to take on c4 but to play knight g5. That's a new opportunity the position affords because of the departure of the knight on e4, so threatening structural damage. And let's say bishop d5, e4, h6, e takes. This just ends up being very, very nice for white from a positional perspective. If we look at this again, this key variation, if queen d7 here, then we take on e6, take on c4, d5 is strong here, it turns out, opening up the position like this. So we're hitting b7, let's say queen b5. This situation is very, very good pressure for white. So that is actually a position white's going to get the material back with a bit of interest. If bishop f5, then b takes c4, h6, e4 here, and knight f3. This is pleasant enough for white. This kind of scenario is pleasant enough. So it all works out quite well if b takes c4. As long as white doesn't take here. This is not the intention though. This is just equal. There's nothing to write home about here. So the other point is, if knight takes d2, then c5 for black, and that's quite a nasty pin on b2. This is just equal, very equal. Black's got no problems there. So queen takes d2 keeps an advantage in the position. We see knight a6, rook ac1, queen d6, and on knight e5. So celebrating this Fianchetto, supporting the e5 square. Rook d8. If bishop takes e5, let's just test this. D takes. This is just going to be very good for white. And you know, the dark square attack is incoming here. So okay, rook fd8, rook fd1, rook c8, and now queen a5. So there's pressure on the black position. D takes c4, knight takes c4. So it's very positionally played. You'd think that it's Botvinnik or something playing white, a positional player playing white, but Tal is super positional in this game so far. I hope you'll agree. That's just my opinion now. It looks very, very positional from white. Queen b8, e4, bishop takes c4, rook takes c4, knight c7. And now here, a very unfortunate move for black, bishop h3, putting a lot of pressure on the black position, e6, and now bishop c1 with the intention of pinning this knight. And so Botvinnik in advance plays queen a8 in advance of the pin. Why is it important to do that in advance of the pin? If h6 and we get the pin on queen a8, can you see what white plays here? It's a bit too late for black to stop this next move if this was the position. For 100 points, white would play d5. This is very, very nice for white. Look at this pressure. So c takes, we're just taking there. What does black actually do? Black's getting broken up here. If e takes, that loses the c8 rook. So yes, this is painful. If bishop takes and d takes, that will be a very painful outcome. So queen a8 against that pin and advance. We see bishop g5 though now. If bishop f4, black does have b5 here. So for example here, rook takes d4, this should be an even position. But bishop g5 now, rook e8, so while the rook was protecting d4, and now queen d2, and now here f5, you might find this very, very strange, this move, f5. So here, we see the move bishop h6. So why on earth is f5 actually played here? Now this is just a fictional continuation. Let's say black doesn't do much, a5. This was just my own theoretical interest. White does actually have, after bishop g2, with the queen on a8, a kind of sign that really an attack should be played with the h file. So let's say black does nothing much, h4, h5, let's say bishop f3, we get this perk of an h-file attack, which white should really use, and can even close up here with e5 to stop black playing e5, and then just get a clear dark square attack. This would be a disaster for black. So for example like this, with bishop takes d5, bishop f6, I know this is brilliant tactically, this is state-of-the-art engines at work for this fictional continuation, but here this works. If d takes, can you see what white plays here, which is winning for 100 points? Okay, queen h6, this will be absolutely winning. I know it's pure a work of fiction, but it just shows, it gives an insight that actually if black doesn't do anything active like f5 and try and secure the king side, you know, there are ways for white to just progress and attack with h4, h5, and actually in the game continuation it does a little bit echo an h-pawn attack anyway coming up. We see bishop h6, bishop takes, queen takes, rook e7, rook e1, rook f8, rook c5, and now we see queen d8, and here interestingly rook e5 is played by Tal, kind of daring queen takes d4, because white's idea is to play e takes and double rooks on e6. Botvinnik, it seems, didn't want to calculate potentially unclear continuations, especially approaching time trouble. He wanted to keep it as simple as possible, and played actually just rook g7. It does turn out, you know, queen takes d4 would have been good for black to equalize at least. It is winning a centre pawn. If e takes f5, g takes, okay, there's e6 is a big target, it seems, and that's the concern. So rook g7, bishop c4 is perhaps the concern. But with accurate, careful play, this should be an even position. But, okay. We have, though, rook g7, and now the queen comes back officially supporting d4, queen d6. Perhaps Botvinnik is just wanting white to defend d4 to be passive, to be able to equalize more easily. Bishop f1, rook d7. So perhaps this is the idea, just to torture d4 instead of actually literally taking it. We see e takes. Just in time, you know, black is threatening things like queen takes and rook takes d2. So e takes f5, rook takes f5, rook 5 to e4, rook f6. Now this is again a little bit maybe on the passive side for e6. It seems rook d5 going for d4 is a great way to go. For example, if rook e3, and there's like things like c5, but c5 is risky, a little bit risky perhaps compared to rook takes d4. This situation, it seems as though black should be okay. There's nothing too much to worry. In theory, it seems okay. For example, this could end up being fizzling out to equality. c5 may be a little bit riskier because of bishop c4 and queen a5. This is a little bit riskier. There's pressure on the black position, which might be uncomfortable here. That seems to be quite a fine bishop on c4 there. Okay, but rook f6 is a little bit on the passive side. h4, king g7. And now this, h5. So this h-pawn attack does actually occur in the main line of the game. It is a perk of the white position here to try and undermine black's pawn chain over there. We have g takes, rook h4. So some lines are being opened around the king, which increase the potential for forcing move kind of tactics. King g8. We have bishop d3, rook g7. On the other hand, it looks as though, hold on, black's got a lot of stuff going here, isn't it? We see rook e5, blunting the queen, rook ff7, queen h6. Also here, rook e takes h5. It seems as though this should be to white's advantage. So this fragmentation of pawns is starting to tell against black, to reveal itself. So we have queen e7. And now rook e takes h5. So yes, the fragmentation of black's pawns is a concern with the light square pawn target. It does seem as though white's in control here overall. Knight d5, except for that knight. That knight looks quite good there. Queen d2, knight f6, rook h6, queen d6, rook f4, queen f8, queen e3, knight d5. And now rook takes f7, queen takes f7, now queen e5. This is giving lots of opportunities around the board, like queen b8. If Tal in this position plays queen takes e6, black might have some very good drawing chances. So this looks like a bit of a trick because of queen takes, rook takes. And can you see what black could play in this position for 50 points, which would give good drawing chances in practice? Okay, black has knight f4 using that pinned pawn. Yeah, the tactics are there of pins, etc. Just because we came from a quiet opening, we can't switch off tactically. If rook e3, knight takes d3, and it looks as though, even though technically white's got an advantage, it's going to be a hard task to win this endgame. It might be a drawn endgame in theory, in fact. So yeah, if also, rook e8 check and king f7, we get the same scenario. Virtually, well, a slightly different scenario, which is again a very, very tough nut to crack. It's probably a draw with best play. So yes, Tal perhaps very wisely avoided queen takes e6, kept the pressure on the black position here. Okay, knight c7, queen c5, queen f3. And here it seems much more concrete, starting to be more concrete now, certain possibilities. If a5 had been played instead, white can get an advantage with queen a7. In particular, that seems the most clinical move. So for example, if the knight ever moves, can you see what white plays here for 100 points? There's a little tactic here, based on the pressure points. There's a rook takes e6. Yeah, the diagonal of death here. If queen takes, got a roll diagonal of death, bishop c4, winning the queen. So that's no good at all for black. If b5, then queen takes f7, rook takes c6. That's falling to pieces for black. So yeah, queen a7 would seem, after a5, queen a7 is very, very good. If a6, again, queen a7, we've got similar variations. What does black actually do in this kind of position? If yeah, so it's actually rather tricky. I mean, also queen b6, even if queen a7 is not used, this situation is dangerous because of bishop takes h7, winning material there. So okay, it's starting to be a desperate position for black. So queen f3 is played, but now there's a wonderful tactic for 200 points. I wonder if you can work it out. What does Tal play in this position? Okay, it's bishop takes h7 check. Yeah, lovely tactics. After rook takes, queen g5 check. If the rook doesn't take, then say king f7, queen e5 looks at the knight on c7 and safeguards g3 as well. So say here, then there's bishop g6 check, and this gets vicious after rook h7 check and say queen h8 mate. So the rook takes on h7, queen g5 check, and now king h8. If rook g7, then we have queen d8 check, and this is no good at all for black, because here, for 50 points, what would you play? Okay, just deflect the king, rook h8 check, and win the queen. So, yes, this is very dangerous. If king f7, then we just take the knight, we're knight up, and then we're mating as well. So, okay, we have king h8, queen d8 check, king g7, and now just cashing out into an endgame here for Tal. It's a strong queen endgame. 2 pawns up. We see queen e4, queen a6, clinging on to the pressure on c6 here and looking after this diagonal. Or rather persisting the pressure on c6, not clinging on, persisting the pressure on c6. We see queen b1 check. If queen takes d4, queen takes c6 check, this position, it seems, you know, white should be doing very well here. White is 2 pawns up. So, okay, queen b1 check was played, king g2, queen e4, and now some checks, and now we see some transitioning. Yeah, so after king f6, queen takes c6, it's now 3 pawns down for black. Tal giving 1 pawn back, and now opening up with d5. This looks like a very nifty move to break the position a bit more open, give some more opportunity for white, and getting this pawn back, so still being now 2 pawns up. We see queen a1 check, king f4. The king is making some inroads, potentially check, and the king comes in to f6 now, and here is the end of the game. Botvinnik actually resigns. If queen a1 check, king e6, and say queen c1, queen d6 check, these pawns are just too good. For example, like this, it's going to be a winning endgame. For example, like this, could be a winning endgame transition, easily winning. Black can't cope with this pawn and this pawn. So yes, and here, if you know king h6 say, then king f7 check, and then that's why I'm mating. So it all gets very difficult anyway. After king f6, Botvinnik resigned. So some key takeaway points. We see Tal playing very strategically, positionally. This kind of reputation of Tal just being a tactician, or the tactician versus the strategist, that whole concept of this match is challenged by this game example. It seems Mikhail Tal is just as strategically powerful as Botvinnik. And yes, if he wasn't unwell, he, you know, in my view, he wouldn't have lost the rematch the next year. The rematch should have been delayed, in my view. So, but that's my personal opinion. You know, Tal had health issues, and the rematch clause of this match is such that Botvinnik can just rematch the challenger and use this match as kind of training preparation, you know, to study the opponent with his team, and then come up with, you know, specifically a concrete opening repertoire, and based on that repertoire, an approach to tackle Tal's strengths. But it's clear from this game that Tal is strategic as well as tactical, you know, very, very strategic and tactical combined. It's a lethal kind of mixture here that we witness in this very, very fine game. So a nagging positional advantage from a double fianchetto system. You can't really get more positional than that. The opening here, double fianchetto, which was also used, by the way, in later years by Garry Kasparov in a crunch final game against Anatoly Karpov, a double fianchetto system. So these play an important role, it seems, in key World Championship match games when white is playing for a slow, protracted struggle, a positional struggle, and we see a great one here. So takeaway points, Tal is very strategic as well as tactical, and this is evidenced in this game. That's the big takeaway point for me. Okay, thanks so much. Hi there, thanks for getting to the end of the YouTube video. If you would like to see other Mikhail Tal games, I actually have an amazing course for Mikhail Tal, which is currently at 4.9 with over 400 students. You can check this out from the Kingscrusher TV page. So Chess Strategy and Tactics, Mikhail Tal's Amazing Games. You can check out some free preview videos as well here. If you do expand all sections, you can see the preview links to get some free previews. So I hope you do check out this course index and the free previews. So I really had a thrilling time actually checking out Mikhail Tal's games. So yeah, the YouTube video here you saw was just a sample from this course. I hope you check it out. Okay, thanks so much. Oh, by the way, comments, questions, likes, shares, all appreciated. And if you did get to this part of the video, please do leave some sort of comment like Tal fan. Okay, thanks again.